This time we're going to France. Italy. Crete. Now, those of you who remember my Syria video will probably think you are watching it again, and that we are going to continue eastwards and end up in Syria and the Holy Land, which is exactly what the participants in the Fourth Crusade expected. But the Fourth Crusade had been hijacked by the Venetians, and it made a sudden and unexpected diversion to Constantinople, or Istanbul as we call it today. I hope that you will see the relevance of this as the story progresses. Anyway, Istanbul is our first destination, from which we plan to make a tour of Turkey, or the western half of Turkey to be more accurate. And Istanbul is already coming into view. It was once called Byzantium, then renamed Constantinople when it became the second capital of the Roman Empire. It became Istanbul when it was captured by the Osmanli Turks in 1453 and became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. So we're now in Istanbul, a city half of which is in Europe geographically and half in Asia. These main roads leading in and out of the town seem to be solid traffic jams from morning till night. We are told by Europhiles that Turkey is very keen to join Euroland. I'm not so sure. They seem to be doing very well on their own. Thanks very much. We're staying here for one night before starting our tour, and I popped down the road to have a traditional English dish of lasagna bolognese. Right then, so what's the plan? Well, firstly, let's get our bearings. This peninsula here, which in my day we used to call Asia Minor, is today more or less coterminous with the state of Turkey. We shall also at times call it Anatolia, especially when talking about the area before the foundation of the state of Turkey in 1923. Now, on our tour, we'll be looking mainly at Western Turkey. To further our orientation, let's look at this area in the top left-hand corner. The narrow straits running between European Istanbul and Asian Istanbul is the Bosphorus. This is the Sea of Marmara, and this strait is known to us as the Dardanelles. Next morning we fight our way out of Istanbul through the traffic and through the mist and through the pouring rain. After a fairly long journey, including 2 comfort stops, we arrive at our first destination, which is the Dardanelles. In the First World War, Turkey sided with Germany. After many months of stalemate on the Western Front in Flanders, a brilliant plan was devised, mainly by Churchill, to take the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus Strait so that access could be obtained to the Black Sea and supplies could be sent to Russia, which was fighting Germany on the Eastern Front. And this is Gallipoli, where the invasion forces, mainly from Australia and New Zealand, came ashore. The campaign from, shall we call it, our side, was something of a disaster. A lot of people died here. The troops were put ashore on the wrong beach and faced a mountain slope up which to attack the Turks. The navy would blast the Turks from their uphill positions, the invaders would rush up and take over, and then the Turks would counterattack and retrieve the position. This monument commemorates an incident where a Turkish soldier went out into no man's land to carry a wounded Australian back to the Allied lines. Down there is the landing beach, and we're now at those uphill positions. That will perhaps give you some idea of the furthest progress that was made. Many more of those Anzac troops are buried here. This position became known as Lone Pine. Contrary to expectations, the resistance of the Turks was substantial and effective. Just across the small adjacent road here is the Turkish cemetery. One of the commanders of the Turkish troops was called Mustafa Kemal. His stature grew during the campaign and continued to grow during subsequent actions. We shall hear more about Mustafa Kemal. After 9 months, the invasion forces withdrew. We also have come down to the coast and are aboard a ferry ready to cross the Dardanelles to Çanakkale. I understand that in Turkey the Gallipoli campaign is known as the Çanakkale Wars, and this is a memorial to the people who fought there. So whilst we cross the Dardanelles, let's remember that this ally of Germany wasn't the Republic of Turkey which we know today, it was the Ottoman Empire, past its greater days but still in possession of Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia and Saudi Arabia as we call it today. Soon after Gallipoli, an Arab revolt, advised by Lawrence of Arabia, began, starting at the southern end of Arabia, progressively expelling Ottoman troops from this area. With a little help from Allenby and the British Army, they eventually took Mesopotamia and Syria, and the Ottoman Empire fell. At the end of World War I, Anatolia was effectively parcelled out to the various allies, mainly British, French and Italian. Well, we're here now at Çanakkale, so we'll finish that story later. Our hotel for that first night had rabbits in the grounds. Hello, Bunny Rabbit. I may as well admit now what you've probably realised already, that I'm in a group again this time. So as we arrive at our next destination, Troy, it's about time I introduce you to our driver and our leader.
I'll have to shout, you see. I want to introduce our leader, Aran, and our driver, Birol. They're both very good men. Thank you very much.
So while we're all arriving at Troy and getting ourselves together, let's finish that story. Since about 1700, the Ottoman Empire had been declining. Successive sultans appeared to be increasingly ineffective. Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria and Egypt gained their independence. In 1909, a Committee for Union and Progress, called the Young Turks by the West, deposed the Sultan Abdul Hamid and established a constitutional monarchy, steered by the committee's head, Enver Pasha. In 1920, a Greek army invaded Anatolia to claim their share. Came the hour, came the man. Mustafa Kemal, who we met at Gallipoli, was opposed to the post-war settlement. Having left Istanbul and presumably his army post, he raised an army and in what became known as the War of Independence expelled the Greeks. By September 1920, all foreign troops had left the country, and in 1923 a republic was declared with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk as its president. The story of Troy takes us really right back to the earlier part of the story of Anatolia. We all know the story of the Battle of Troy, caused by the abduction of Helen, through to the wooden horse which caused its end, because Homer, the Dan Brown of his day, wrote the story which we all know. But was it all just a story made up by Homer? For centuries, if not millennia, people didn't know the answer to that question. There was certainly this site about which people speculated. Then, early in the 18th century, an Englishman called Calvert had a brilliant idea. He dug a trench into the hill which was rumoured to be the site of Troy, and found a sample of the type of remains which we are now seeing. Since then, the site seems to have been subject to more or less continual excavation. As they dug deeper, it became apparent that about 10 or 11 Troys had been built on the same site. After one town had been flattened by earthquake or deliberate destruction by an enemy, another town was built, sometime later, on top of the rubble. After the 10th or 11th town fell into ruins, the site became totally covered by earth like Ugarit and no doubt many others. Its very existence receded further and further back into memory and folklore. What Aran is telling us here is that the sea has receded and that the shoreline used to be just over this bank here. That's where the Greek ships would have rode at anchor. Well now, look here. The wooden horse is still here. Pretty conclusive evidence, don't you think? I couldn't possibly describe this site. You just have to go there, be there, and imagine. We next made a brief stop in Izmir, which used to be Smyrna, on our way to our overnight stay at Kushadasi. Incidentally, whilst we were scrambling about the site at Troy, one of our party tripped and broke her heel or something. Nobody mentioned Achilles, so I won't. However, for the rest of the tour, our driver, Birol, did a sterling job with the wheelchair. As we arrive in Kushadasi, it's about time I made another admission. Some months ago I was told that I had got motor neuron disease. If you're not sure what that is, you might like to look at this video here. I mention it here because apart from it affecting how far I can walk, it particularly affects my speech. So now, to put the narration on these videos, I generally have to record each sentence 3 or 4 times until I get a reasonable copy and then speed it up. If you have heard some slurred speech in my recent videos, before I improved my recording technique, you probably thought I'd been on the bottle. Anyway, Birol has again safely brought us to our hotel in Kushadasi this time, where we are staying for 2 nights.